All right. So I was going to talk through now kind of the more specific steps we take in terms of our monitoring plan. So really what our monitoring plan looks like in practice in terms of tools and execution. So I'm going to walk through each of our different checkpoints that we have with our grantees, as well as talk through, what that checkpoint is, who it is that's actually executing it, so if it's a portfolio team or a compliance team or both, and also how we do it and where, so whether or not it's on-site or remote, as well as the frequency. So the first thing that is the big piece of our monitoring plan is the annual work plan that we set with our grantees. So prior to the start of each year, we sit down with our grantees and we lay out exactly what they're going to achieve and accomplish for the year. So this includes specific goals in terms of people employed numbers, as well as financial numbers and retention numbers, but also, any programmatic improvements we want to see, any compliance things we want to see, any additional evaluation type things we want to see. All of that gets built into the annual work plan. And it's the portfolio team largely that sets this with the grantees and also monitors against it. And this is something we have documented now, and we keep it in our database and refer back to it on a regular basis to make sure that the groups are, aware of where they should be. And we do this both a combination of on-site and remote. So some of our grantees are now actually across the country, and so we do see them on a regular basis, but during the development of the annual work plan, typically it'll cover a couple meetings and may happen both over the phone as well as in person. The second really big piece that we do on an annual basis is the annual budget. So this is something that we actually do in partnership with both the other compliance team members as well. So we sit down with them and we actually look at the work plan and we say, what do you need in your budget to actually accomplish these goals that we've laid out? And we have our grantees set a quarterly budget for each quarter of the year, and we also talk to them about allocating their match spending, and then have them tell us, where their match is anticipated to come from. And we really work closely with compliance and finance to make sure that the budget and the spending that's laid out is compliant with all SIF requirements and also compliant and aligned with their work goals and priorities. So we set this annual budget, again, at the very beginning of the year with each grantee as a team effort, and we revisit this at least quarterly, but sometimes more frequently. So if a grantee, if something changes with a grantee or we identify an issue and they want to make some adjustments, then they'll reach out to us and we'll have a discussion with them about any adjustments we need to make with the budget. But again, it's a tool that we reference on a regular basis with our grantees. The other thing that we do with them is monthly check-in meetings. So this is the portfolio team that goes typically actually in person to the grantee sites and actually sits down with them and talks over how they're doing against their goals, how they're doing against their work plan, and it's both a combination of monitoring and reporting on the grantee side as well as a time for us to actually do some troubleshooting in person and use it as a work session. So, if we're working on a technical assistance project with a group, then that might be a time we work on it or check in on it. And if we're not working on any specific project, we still meet with them regularly to make sure that they are hitting their goals, and it's also a time for us to actually also touch base on any compliance or finance issues that have arisen that maybe aren't as urgent as, must be addressed the minute we find it, but, if it's something like, hey, we've noticed XYZ, or, are you having any trouble with your criminal history check process? Can we help you improve that? Those are kind of the types of things we'll address at these monthly check-ins. So it's primarily the portfolio team that goes and does these monthly check-ins, but every once in a while we'll have compliance or finance join us if there's some specific issue that they want to address with them. In addition to these monthly check-ins, we also have several monthly reporting things that we have our grantees report to us. So they report their people employed goals, they report intake and outcome information, and they also report their financials to us. And again, we're going over those monthly, and if there are any questions or issues that we're concerned with, we bring it up with our other partners and the finance and compliance team. So it's very collaborative. This is something, again, that can happen both remotely or in person. So if it's something that happens around the time when we're going to be visiting anyway, we'll bring it up in person. But we also definitely utilize and leverage a lot of technology in reaching out to our grantees. The next piece, which is quarterly grant spending budget to actual review, is really, I think, where we work most in collaboration with finance and compliance. So on a quarterly basis, we have our grantees report their spending to us, and we review it for programmatic fit to ensure that it's really aligned with the goals that we laid out, and we review it for financial compliance to make sure that, you know, it's actually spending according to all the correct rules. And we also have compliance review it to make sure that, you know, if there are any procurement situations, that we have all the proper documentation and they followed all the right processes. So it's really a group effort where we sit down and we discuss what they've reported and the backup documentation they've submitted and make sure that everything is really in line. So on a quarterly basis, at least, we're always touching base and checking in to make sure that our grantees are really hitting the mark. Every 6 months, so at a mid-year review point, we check in with our grantees against their work plan goals. So we are regularly, on a monthly basis, touching base, but we have a formal review mid-year where we actually have them submit their notes on, you know, how they think they're doing against their goals, and then that's when we really have, you know, step back and take a look and course correct as needed. And then, of course, we do this again at the end of the year. So how did they really do against all of their goals, and what do we, you know, are they having troubles? Do we need to adjust things? Like, how do we get them back up to speed? Do we need to change their grant amount based on their performance, that kind of thing? And that's at the end of the year. And that really actually informs this last piece that I want to mention, which is our annual portfolio review. So Chris mentioned earlier the importance of taking these lessons that you've learned or these issues that have arisen and making sure that you're kind of pulling back and applying them to other grantees as well, or, you know, making sure that you're checking to see if it's a system-wide issue or if it's, you know, just group-specific. But we really do, on a regular basis, if an issue comes up, we try to make sure that other grantees aren't experiencing that, try to apply all those lessons learned. And then at the end of the year, we really step back and we look at holistically and overall, how did our portfolio do against all of their goals, and also from a compliance standpoint as well. And we try to make adjustments and course corrections, and as we make decisions on funding in the next year, all of that information and overview really feeds into that. Compliance and fiscal review visits are typically separate, so we don't do them at the same time as the monthly visits, but they are very much a partnership. So the portfolio manager would work with the compliance and finance review teams to set up these visits and work with the grantees to make sure they're prepped for it whenever that occurs. And finally, I think in terms of tools to help track and manage all of this data and documentation, what we have moved to this year, actually, which is incredibly exciting for us, is we recently moved to a Salesforce-based data platform to track and keep all of this data and reporting. So there's one central repository online now that all teams go to for this information. So all of the notes from the monthly visits with our grantees, the portfolio managers and the portfolio associates put those notes up. We document everything and we put it online, and that way any other team can go in and check and see how things are. When we do a budget to actual review, all of that is also online. Actually, the groups now report their budgets online. They submit their work plan goals online, and we go through and check through them. And what's great about this is that it allows us to have a more robust approvals process, so we know exactly who signed off on what, and if someone has a question on something, then they can flag it and they can say, you know, I don't approve this and this is why, and then the other team members know to go in and either dig more deeply on it or not. So it keeps this great record for us, and that way, you know, if we see there are recurring issues with any group, so we can address those. We can sort to see trends across different groups in terms of challenges that they're having. And also we can monitor the performance of our portfolio overall in a much more comprehensive manner now that everything is online. So I think having definitely one thing to consider as you're working through your own monitoring process is, how will you keep track of all of this data and documentation, because there is so much. And of course, REDF's been this isn't something we were able to do right away. Like I said, REDF has been a subgrantee now for since 2010, and we're just now getting this system up in place. So there are obviously other ways you can do it, but I think now that we have figured out that there's a way to do it sort of in a centralized online database, it's been really, really fantastic for us. Yeah, so that's kind of how we do our monitoring plan. Happy to answer any questions as needed.
Great, Karen, and we actually have a question for you. So one of the questions is, do you have experience with subgrantee corrective action plans? If so, can you please walk through the process for corrective action, and do you have any advice or recommendations? Thanks.
Karen, do you have any practical kind of experience from REDF or?
Yes. Yeah, so sorry, I had accidentally muted myself and couldn't tell. So we do. So we've had grantees that have had some issues both from the programmatic side, so they're not necessarily hitting all of the goals that we've laid out for them for performance, as well as the compliance side. So if a group is not hitting their programmatic targets, the relationship manager will sit down with them and work to identify what it is that is causing the issues, and really talk through making sure we really understand actually what the core cause is. So because I think a lot of times the grantees will say, we weren't able to hit our sales target because of X, Y, Z, and what we want to make sure of on our side is really if that's the case, or if there's some other underlying issue that because the grantee is too close to it, they're not identifying, but because we can come in with some sort of outsider perspective or perspective that we've gained from, other grantees or lessons learned across other portfolio groups, we can make sure we're really addressing the right issues. So we really figure out that plan first, or figure out what we think the root cause is, and then we lay out how we're going to address that. So whether it's a combination of REDF providing technical assistance or REDF finding additional resources or consultants who we think are experts in the area can help address it, or if it's something like we think that the grantee themselves could address it with simple process changes. We'll basically lay that out. But we make sure grantees actually understand the consequences of not hitting certain goals. And so I think all of our grantees are aware if they don't hit specific goals, especially ones that have been laid out in their agreements for the year, that it really affects their ability to continue to be sub-grantees, and it really affects the amount of funding that they'll get in the future if they even are able to continue on. And so we just work with our grantees to make sure they understand that and evaluate, and they all know these evaluation points come up, and they know we're going to be assessing them, at the midpoint as well as at the end as well, but also continuously, and that's kind of how we do our monitoring plan. If it's a compliance issue, we actually will do something very similar where we figure out what exactly is the issue, and then we'll try to work with them to help figure out how do you address this. So, we've had grantees who've really struggled with getting in the criminal history check information in time. So we've first made very clear to them that if you don't get this in, you will not be able to charge someone's time against the grant, and that typically really helps speed things up. But for groups that are still struggling with that, we're willing to work with them closely and consistently to try to figure out a solution. But also, I think one of the things that we have to make sure groups understand is that, again, if they're not compliant, then exiting them from the portfolio is also an option, and is something we've certainly had to do in the past as well.
Karen, we have another question for you. So Adrian asks, I'm interested in Salesforce. Did REDF build it out? And if yes, how long did it take to build it out and then use?
Yeah, so we have been building it out with the help of a consultant, and it's, gosh, so it's we started in 2016. It's probably been, I mean, I think it's been a full year. It's certainly been a real process, but I think as we've built it out, we've really had the portfolio team and the compliance team, so basically all of the stakeholders and users working on it like throughout the whole process. So any changes that happen or, you know, any suggestions that we have along the lines that can get incorporated pretty quickly. So I think overall, like getting the adoption has been, or getting the teams to adopt it has been easier than we anticipated, partly because it is such a improvement from you know, using Excel and different folders and trying to track things that way. Like it's really fantastic to have everything online. But it is definitely time intensive for sure. We've had a team of people from Red Off, like a cross-functional team, working on this, you know, twice a week for nearly a year now. And so it's certainly time intensive to set up the way that we wanted it to work out, and then certainly also resource intensive. But so far we felt like it's really been worth it because it really improves our processes and our reporting capabilities.
Great. I want to be cognizant of time. We are right at 4 o'clock. We do have a couple more questions, so I will go ahead and ask these. If you have to leave, I completely understand that, but we will be recording this, and you can come back and listen to the last tidbit to get the answers to the remaining questions. So, Karen, we have one more, or a couple more, actually. It sounds like the relationship managers are SIFT experts. Were they hired as part of the grant, and do they have responsibilities outside of the SIFT grant?
So actually, I would say that the relationship managers were not SIFT experts at all coming in. So none of us, myself included, who came in to Red F had grants compliance experience before. So we've all actually just trained and learned as we've gone along. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, it's certainly been a long road, but I think Red F at this, you know, has been doing it long enough that we have some good systems and documentation in place in order for our relationship managers to learn, and we have a great finance and compliance team as well who's really taught us a lot. But that's really why I think it's a partnership. So Red F hires our relationship managers to actually do the technical assistance and relationship management piece, so really helping groups figure out how to hit their goals and identify you know, identify resources for the organizations to really expand and scale the work that they're doing. So a lot of them come with, you know, maybe a business background or a programs background, but none of us came with like a grants compliance background. So that's the piece that we've all had to learn in partnership with the rest of our team. But I think it works well for us because we have someone who's able to kind of train us, and I think for the grantees, it's nice to have sort of one consistent point of contact who's helping them on both the programmatic goals side, but also is able to help them navigate the challenges of SIF compliance as well. But no, none of us came in knowing much about SIF, to be perfectly honest.
Wow, it sounds like you guys got up to speed pretty quickly. So I have a question for both Karen and Chris this time. Are there any protocols for monitoring service recipients?
I don't know if I have anything in particular other than what I've mentioned, I guess. I don't know. Chris, if you do?
I think a lot of the service recipient kind of monitoring is much more evaluative in terms of the evaluation side from a process perspective, not from a technical grant compliance perspective. A lot of that is satisfaction surveys and other survey type instruments to see, you know, kind of where the service recipients start and is the program doing their due diligence to move them in the direction of whatever topic they're working on. But not from a compliance perspective. I have not seen a monitoring tool.
Katie does write in the chat box that service recipients would be PFS. Irvin is developing a separate set of criteria for SIF to look at, mostly ensuring MOUs are in place. So the POs are working on that. And so in closing, we also have some requests to maybe find another time that we could do a demo of the Salesforce program that Rediff has developed. So Karen, I'd love to try to work with you to see if there's any way that we could do that and keep the names and things that we need to keep, we need to protect, but if we could do something to be able to demonstrate what your Salesforce program looks like.
Yeah, definitely. Let's connect on that. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone, for all of your patience through some technical difficulties there and a storm, and Chris for jumping on and off and managing that. So we thank everyone for your participation. Karen, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informative, and it looks like we had a lot of questions on this webinar, so obviously it was a needed and interesting topic for everyone.